The alarm tore through the ship before I even had time to set down my cup. Red light spilled across every wall, and the floor shook once, hard, like something massive had just knocked on our hull, and did not plan to wait for an answer. My name is Ellen Marsh. I was the second engineer aboard the Kestrel Dawn, a transport ship carrying 3,000 sleeping colonists across open space. We were not built for a fight. Our only defense was a small turret meant to knock aside loose rocks, nothing more. So when a warship dropped out of nowhere and locked onto us, my first thought was that the sensors had made a mistake. Nobody attacks a ship full of sleeping families. There was no reason for it. There was no gain in it. I was wrong. There was a reason. It just was not one we understood yet. A voice broke through every speaker on the ship at once, cold and flat, translated by our system into words that still managed to sound like a blade being drawn. Human vessel, you are unarmed. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will end badly for you. This is your only warning. For 3 full seconds, nobody on the bridge said a word. Then Captain Nora Bell's voice came through the intercom, steady in a way that told me she was holding herself together through pure will. They want us to shut down and let them in, she said. Does anyone here think that is a good idea? Not one person answered yes. I found out later that this alien fleet, the Cothrell, had done this same thing 11 times before against 11 other ships from other worlds. And every single time, the crew had surrendered. It was not even really a battle for them. It was a routine. Show up, threaten, wait a moment, take what you came for. Clean, easy, expected. What they did not know is that humans have a strange habit. When someone points a weapon at us and orders us to kneel, a good number of us will look at the danger, understand exactly how bad it is, and do something reckless anyway. Captain Bell did not answer their hail. Instead, she opened a channel to the whole crew. Hold your stations, she said. We are not shutting down. Down in the engine room, our chief engineer, a broad-shouldered man named Peter Lang, was already moving before the captain finished speaking. He had spent 20 years building stations in open orbit before he ever set foot on a transport ship, and he looked at our lonely little turret like it had personally insulted him. That thing could not stop a snowball, he said. Give me time. He did not get much time. The enemy ship grew tired of waiting and fired a warning shot across our hull, not to destroy us, we would later understand, but to frighten us into giving up without losing whatever cargo they wanted to take. The impact rocked the whole ship sideways. Emergency doors slammed shut across 6 decks. Lights flickered, died, and came back weaker than before. Peter was already shouting into his comm, calling for every spare bit of power to be rerouted through an old mining laser bolted to our hull, a tool meant for cutting through asteroid rock during repair work, never meant for anything close to a battle. I did not fully understand his plan. I only understood that my job was to keep our reactor from overheating while he pulled more power from it than it was ever built to give. So that is what I did, hands shaking, eyes on the gauges, praying the numbers would hold. What happened next, I only heard about afterward, because I spent that whole stretch buried in cables and warning lights. Peter had pulled power from 3 systems we did not need in that moment, and fed all of it into that mining laser. It was never designed for combat, but power does not care what a tool was built for. It only cares what that tool can survive. The first shot from our little laser tore through one of their engines. The second one struck deep into their main weapon system. For a moment, the whole enemy ship went dark, drifting, as if it could not believe what had just happened. Their crew had planned for surrender. They had not planned for a transport ship to fight back with everything it had. Captain Bell gave the order to move closer instead of turning away. I did not understand that choice until Daniel Cole, our navigator, explained it to me weeks later over a quiet dinner. A wounded predator that has already decided you are prey does not stop being dangerous just because you are afraid of it, he told me. So the captain decided We would stop being afraid and start being a problem they could not solve. The enemy tried to break off and escape, but they never managed it cleanly. Their ship had already lost too much. We watched their formation scatter, some ships peeling away entirely, others drifting with no power at all. It was over faster than it had begun, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the alarms had. We managed to pull one of their crew from an escape pod, more out of instinct than any plan. He was young by their standards, his voice shaking slightly even through the translator. He looked at me with something between confusion and disbelief, and he asked a question that I do not think he expected an answer to. Your ship carries no weapons built for war. Your people have no fleet in this region. Why did you not surrender? Surrender was the only sensible choice. I thought about that question for a long moment before I answered him. I thought about Peter Lang refusing to accept that our only defense was a toy. I thought about Captain Bell choosing to move closer instead of turning away. I thought about every person on that ship who looked at terrible odds and decided the odds could wait. You built your plan around what we had, I told him. You should have built it around what we would do. He did not have an answer for that. I am not sure there was one. It took us 6 weeks to limp the Kestrel Dawn back to a proper station. Our hull was scarred, half our systems were held together with wire and stubbornness, and every one of us was exhausted in a way that sleep could not fix. The 3,000 colonists on board never woke up during any of it. They never knew how close they came to losing everything, and in a strange way, I was glad they never had to. News of what happened spread quickly once we docked. Word moves fast between people who share the same fear, and it moves even faster between people who share the same relief. Other transport ships heard our story and began fitting old mining tools and cutting lasers into makeshift defenses of their own, just in case. Engineers across the fleet started asking questions they had never bothered asking before. What else can we build from tools we already have? What else can an unarmed ship become if the people on it refuse to give up? I sat with Peter Lang a few nights later, both of us still recovering, both of us quiet in that way people get after living through something they never expected to survive. He turned his cup around in his hands and told me something I have thought about many times since. They looked at our ship and saw cargo, he said. They never once looked at the people inside it. I think that was the real mistake the Cathrel made, more than any weapon or any warning shot. They studied our ship, our shields, our weapons, and found exactly what they expected to find, which was nothing, but they never studied us. They never asked what kind of people build a home out of steel and carry 3,000 sleeping lives across open space for years at a time, refusing to stop no matter what waited for them out there. If they had asked that question, maybe they would have understood. Maybe they would have known that people like Peter Lang do not see a weak turret and think about giving up. They see a problem to solve. Maybe they would have known that people like Captain Bell do not steer away from danger just because the odds say they should. They steer straight into it, because backing down was never really an option worth considering. Months later, I heard that the Cathrel changed their approach entirely. They stopped raiding unarmed transport ships in our part of space. Some say it was because word had spread among their scouts, warning them that human ships were not the easy targets they seemed to be. Others say it was simple caution, the kind that comes from being burned once and refusing to repeat the mistake. Either way, I do not think about that day as a victory in the way people usually mean that word. Nobody on our ship set out to prove a point or teach anyone a lesson. We were engineers, navigators, and one very frightened captain, all of us doing whatever we could think of to protect 3,000 people who could not protect themselves. That is all it ever was, a group of ordinary people refusing to accept an ending that had already been decided for them. I still work aboard the Kestrel Dawn. The scars on her hull are still there if you know where to look, patched but never fully hidden, and I like it that way. Every time I walk past that old mining laser bolted near the forward section, I remember exactly what it means to be underestimated, and exactly what can happen when the people underestimating you forget to ask the one question that actually matters. They expected a quiet ship full of easy cargo to surrender the moment danger arrived. What they found instead was a crew who had already decided, long before that day, that giving up was never going to be an option worth choosing.